Today's topic is best practices for cannabis dispensary cash handling, and this presentation is brought to you by Green Growth CPAs. Now, it's not just for dispensaries, but anybody that deals in cash in the cannabis industry. You could be a vertically integrated business that has multiple locations, or you have one location where there's a lot of cash. You could be a distributor that collects a lot of cash from the cultivators or from your dispensary partners. There's a lot of cash in this industry, and cash management is important for every small business, but can sink a cannabis operator very, very quickly. In an industry where virtually every transaction is handled in cash, these strong cash handling policies are critical for your survival. Now, one example of just a thing we see quite often is that cannabis business operators typically don't separate out their tax money from their operating capital. They get diluted and think they have a lot of cash on hand, so they maybe make some capital investments or they, do something for the business, but that money that they're using is actually tax money, and they should have, set that aside and not use that as operating capital. The tax bill comes, they don't have the money, and now they're essentially out of business by the next tax period. So bottom line, you need to be very, very careful about what you do with your cash, how you handle your cash, who you trust with your cash, and everything around the money of the business. And we're going to go into some tips about how to handle that. But before we do, I need to let you know that the information contained in this presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. So what we're going to cover today is 10 cash handling best practices, things that we've seen and help other companies and clients implement into their business that can help prevent theft and diversion and any other issues that arise from a cash-heavy business. So the first tip is knowing all of your taxes. You want to work with a CPA that has cannabis-specific experience to learn the different percentages and calculations that you need to allocate all the cash for tax purposes. Now, this is the basis of most issues that a majority of the cannabis businesses face, is not planning for taxes and just waiting for the bill to come instead. Budgeting is such an incredibly easy but important task that a cannabis business operator needs to do since the margins can be razor thin. So you need to know, are your taxes based on gross receipts, or are they based on some other calculation? What is the city tax rate? What is the state tax rate? What is the federal tax rate? This can vary, so you need to speak with an expert about your specific situation. And to make this point incredibly crystal clear, a very well-run dispensary will have some type of target revenues for each month or for each quarter or for each year. This means that when you figure out what those percentages and those calculations are, you can actually calculate what your expected tax bill is before you even start business for each of those periods. So maybe you do it on a quarterly basis. You know how much money, if you sell $1 million in cannabis a quarter, you're going to have to allocate $327,000 for taxes. So you know that as the income goes up, the tax is going to go up. You need to separate that out, and that's your savings goal. So know all of your taxes, have a budget, and have a savings goal. Now, the second one here, you need to practice regular reconciliation and create SOPs or standard operating procedures around cash. So at the end of each day, you need to reconcile your cash that's on hand with your POS system to ensure that there is no theft or diversion. Make sure that your team is actually following your standard operating procedures. It's not just to make them and put them in a binder and never see them again. You have to actually implement them and hold the team accountable that they're using these SOPs. Things like, where will the cash be kept? How will it be counted? And who's going to count it? How will the business actually get a bank account and where? And what's the procedures of making a deposit? How will the cash be transported to that deposit place? Where will the safe be located at? What type of safe is going to be used? So taxes and SOPs and regular reconciliation. Don't just let the money situation get out of hand because you don't want to face it. It can be really, really damaging if you don't have any SOPs around cash handling. Next, you want to put money aside for all the regulating agencies. So we talked about planning for taxes, but cannabis operators must be compliant with regulations from many different agencies at the state level, the local level, and the federal level. So set aside money not just for taxes, but for things like license renewal fees or any kind of permits that you need to get with the state or with the city or any potential penalties that might arise. Again, this is the most important rule that no one sticks to is budgeting and planning, but they wish they had since, these fees can add up quickly. These taxes can add up quickly. Now, good cash flow management means setting aside cash for the right purposes, having an emergency fund or a contingency fund that can cover operating expenses for your company for up to 60 days. Now, this fund, this emergency or contingency fund, can mean the survival of your business when an unexpectedly high tax bill comes, or you're hit with an expense you hadn't planned for. Think about if your manufacturing equipment breaks, or think about having a bad harvest because you get a pest infestation, or the building has a mechanical issue, it leaks water and all your lights are broken, or you have to shut down the building and go through a new inspection and you're out of work and not making money, but you still have rent bills, or you still have a mortgage, you still have all these other bills. You need to have a way to pay those bills. Next, put all the cash on hand in a drop safe. Using a drop safe can help keep your cash safe and make sure that you're budgeting the money in the right places, like literally putting it in the right spot. Now, when putting money in to this drop safe, and a drop safe is essentially money can only go in and there's no way to really get it out. It's not an easy way to get it out. Of course, there's a way to get the money out, but it's not one where you have people in and out of the safe. Now, when you're putting money in, you want to physically separate the cash out, that on the left side is for taxes or the right side's for taxes, or put it in a different safe, and then the cash you're going to use for payroll and other operating expenses is physically separated. Now, make sure that very few people have access to this drop safe. It's going to pretty much be the owner, their lawyer, and one designated cash custodian. Now, you want to record each drop in your cash log. So every time you put money in, make sure you're charting it down and you have a nice, clean record of how much cash went in, when the pickup was made, and then they can reconcile that later at the headquarters. It's really, really easy, but it's something that most people don't stick to. It takes discipline to be successful in the cannabis industry. Next, you might want to have separate bank accounts and adhere to minimum balance requirements, and not just the $10,000 minimum requirement that the bank puts on you, but the one that you're going to set for yourself. Now, if you do have a cannabis business bank account, then be sure again to make deposits 2 to 3 times a week. Don't keep too much cash on hand. And if possible, break your cash into separate accounts: a tax account, a licensing account, an operating expenses account. Now, if you can't break your cash into separate accounts, then be sure to set minimum balance requirements equal to 115% of your estimated tax bill from the first tip that you got in this video of knowing all of your taxes and budgeting for them. So for example, if you have an estimated tax bill of $315,000 per quarter, then make sure you have 115% of that. So make sure you stick to this. And hey, if you have too much, then you have, the gift of extra income and it sits there and you can invest in it. But if you don't have enough, you've at least gotten close enough to your budget that you can actually pay this bill without too much pain. Because if you don't have the money for taxes, it can essentially kill your business. The tax agencies will shut down your business. They'll pull your sales tax permit, they'll pull your cannabis permit, and then you don't have a business. You can't operate legally. So make sure you keep these minimum balance requirements to ease your mind. Next, you want to separate the income from taxes immediately from digital payments. Now, some people are able to accept debit cards or credit cards, and certain merchant processors will allow you to automatically break down your deposits so that you can set aside money for taxes and your operating expenses. So for instance, if you record $100 through your POS system as a sale, you can then set up a system that actually automatically moves $10 to your sales tax account, $10 to your city tax account, and $20 to an account for state and federal taxes. And then whatever's left, less the processing fees, you move over to the main account. Now, if you don't have the ability to set up these automatic deposits into separate accounts, then make sure you reconcile your merchant accounts weekly to account for how much money needs to be separated out for taxes. Don't let too much money accumulate in that merchant account and then you don't know how much is actually going to have to be for taxes. It's really, really important. And I keep bringing up the same thing as budgeting. And when money comes in, separate it out, create a fund flow structure so that money gets put into the right places. So when the April 15th deadline comes in or your quarterly payroll taxes come in, you know that you can actually pay that bill with confidence. Next, you want to have a plan for collecting cash from multiple locations. Now, if you run multiple dispensaries or you're a vertically integrated facility with multiple locations, or maybe you're a distributor who has multiple locations, then all cash should be put into drop safes at the dispensary or your satellite locations and then collected by one trusted cash custodian and reconciled at your main headquarters. You don't want to stress out the dispensary staff with having to pull money out of the safe to pay bills. Let them focus on creating a great guest experience in the dispensary. All those bills should be paid by some kind of centralized accounting staff at your headquarters. Now, we made a video all about optimizing multiple unit cannabis operations. You should check that video out. It goes through many different steps of a client that we helped work through how to think of 7 or 8 dispensaries they had and how to create economies of scale, how to streamline their operations and sleep better at night because they know things are being handled in the best way possible. Next, you want to have till ownership for each register. Now, you may find this surprising, but a lot of businesses, even some of the big people, only recently have implemented till ownership. Now, what till ownership is essentially a person is responsible for the money in the register. So they take a register, maybe it's filled with $200 of change, 10s and 5s and 20s and some change, and then they take that, they do a business for 8-hour shift, and then they come back and they count that money out and make sure everything, comes together and it jives right, it reconciles properly. Now, accountability is critical for good cannabis cash handling. You want to give your general manager or your shift manager the responsibility of counting the cash in the till at the beginning and end of each shift or each workday, and make sure they do it in front of the cashier or the bud tender that will be owning the till so that they can sign off on the count in and the count out. Then you have your general manager reconcile the cash with the record of the day's sales, and then they say, all right, this ties properly. You're not off at all, or maybe you're off by $1. Maybe there was a sticky dollar. And that's that. You don't want to get to the end of the day and $300 is missing. That's very, very important. You do this till ownership so you know who's responsible for that diversion of cash. And make sure that this is done in a room that is recorded with clear views from multiple angles, including overhead. You want every little corner of that room, that cash counting room, to be recorded. Because, people can be misled by just an extra $100, sticky fingers. It just happens. And, I don't know, the money just fell into their pocket by accident. But you need to have video records of this because you don't want to get on the case of the wrong person. And then you have this person that's diverting cash still working for you. This is just stuff for peace of mind. And a lot of the regulations also stipulate that you need to have these kind of cameras. You can go above and beyond what the city or the state requires of you, but you should at least keep your eyes on the cash at all times. Next, you want to set up counterfeit cash detection procedures. Now, unless your employees have worked for the CIA or for a bank or anything else where they handle cash a lot, it's not always really easy to spot fake bills. There are some really authentic looking fakes out there. And unfortunately, the government really does not care whether or not your employees have experienced counterfeiting or whether you've experienced counterfeiting. If you've accepted fake money, you're on the hook for taxes for that cannabis sale. So save yourself from paying taxes on fake money by adding a counterfeit detection procedure and a device. You'll see one here on the screen. It's real simple. You just put the bill under there. They have ones that slide and scan the bills. It's okay. I think it's not going to be a big deal when your clients see that you're, detecting their money. If they feel uncomfortable, it's just too bad, so sad. You don't want to be on the hook for $30 additional in taxes and you don't have any money to pay that because the money you accepted was fake. So set up counterfeit cash detection procedures. And lastly, with the cameras, I want to point out one last specific point here. You want to place cameras over the top of every register so that everything is being recorded. Money crossing the counter, money going in and out of the till. You can also keep your eye on the cannabis as well. Now, security is important for your guests, for your bottom line, and for your employees. So make sure you develop the right protocols and installed security equipment to keep everyone safe during work, including your cash. Now, you hate to hear this, but you need to keep an eye out for your frontline workers. They have the most access to cash throughout the entire day. And you need to keep an eye out on your guests. Now, what if one of your bud tenders is working with a client who is also their friend and they're planning to steal cannabis or pass and steal money throughout the day? Maybe they come in twice a week, they steal a couple $100 every time, or they steal $100 every time. That can add up. Now, here's another one you might see often, is that if someone gets into a customer dispute where the customer actually reports of giving the bud tender a $100 bill, but it was only a $50, you're going to want to get an instant replay through your security cameras over the top to verify who is actually telling the truth. And letting your bud tenders know that you have them on camera all the time can help mitigate diversion of cash as well. They know that the eagle eye is looking right at them all the time. It's going to be very easy to point out who's been, diverting or stealing cash. So it can help to potentially limit them from doing it. There are some people that are very risky and they'll just do it even though they know they're on camera because maybe they know you just put those cameras there, but you never check them. So having these cameras is important, and then doing the reconciliation. And then when something doesn't reconcile properly, you watch the cameras to see where that diversion happened. Money doesn't just disappear by accident, okay? It will go into someone's pocket. So make sure you're capturing the evidence to figure figure out where that money went. And having these cameras and guests seeing them, that they're everywhere and that they're always being watched, will potentially help limit the likelihood that they'll pull a stunt like saying, hey, I gave him a $100 bill when they actually gave a $50. So these cameras can be a preventative measure, but they're also great to document and capture all of that information. So when there is theft and diversion, or heaven forbid, another crazy crime where someone gets held up or something crazy happens, a fight breaks out, you have all of the documentation, all the video evidence that you can hand over to the authorities or to handle the situation yourself. Now, I hope this video has brought you some value and helped you to understand the criticality of cash handling and some tips and thoughts on how to prepare your business and optimize your business so that cash doesn't just walk away, get diverted. You really need to be thoughtful about your cash. Now, you can get help with creating and implementing standard operating procedures for the entire business, but especially for cash by working with Green Growth CPAs. You can reach out to us via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. We'd love to walk you through the process. We can do a limited engagement where we help you understand your specific business. There's many nuances. Maybe your building is set up a certain way where you have to implement a secondary set of SOPs that will help you to relieve the stress of cash and relieve the stress of thinking that it's getting diverted or that tax payments are not getting paid properly. It's all about giving you peace of mind so that you can do what you really love to do, which is build an incredibly valuable business. So if you need help with creating and implementing cash standard operating procedures, please reach out to us via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.